Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Bottom Line. My name is Marti Bledsoe Post. I'm the founder of Apparently and the author of Retrofit, the Playbook for Modern Moms. And I've been doing this series where we talk to working parents and understand how they are combining family and career. And today, my guest is Melissa Benaroya. I'm so glad to have Melissa. She's a therapist and a parent coach and the co-author of Childproof Parenting. So I'm excited to have Melissa with us. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you, Marti. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. I think one thing that 2020 has shown all of us as parents is that we need more help in this arena of how to manage our parenting. And so I will pepper you with questions about that. But to start us off, can you tell us about your own family scenario right now with work and kids and all of that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So both of my husband and myself are working from home. And I have two children that are teenagers that are managing school from home as well. So we have not been in school since last March. So it feels like we're doing a little bit of room tango every day where I'm working in this room, you're taking a call in that room, you're talking to your teacher over there. We're constantly shifting. So a lot of just dynamics and making sure everybody can get their work done and show up and do what they need to do. A lot of coordination. A lot of coordination. But luckily, I do have older children, so I'm not having to do the homeschooling with my kids, which I know a lot of parents, working parents, are having to do.
Yeah.
Like literally moment by moment, teetering between being in a meeting on Zoom and answering some math questions, right? Or
Yeah.
helping with technology, making sure kids are on Zoom when they need to be.
So what is it like with teens right now from a household standpoint?
Yeah, I think mental health is a real big challenge for teens because this is a point in their development where they are breaking off and their peer group is the most important piece of their life and their world. And right now, my children aren't actually able to see most of their friends. They each have a friend, but building those networks, those dynamics, those skills, personal skills and how to manage conflict with people and build intimate relationships, it's just not happening. So it's a big struggle for teenagers right now.
Mm-hmm. Overall, how have your children impacted your career?
Yeah, well, they've impacted my career in many different ways. But I think, first of all, driving what I chose to do as a career. So I just feel so passionate about raising healthy, happy children and creating strong relationships between parent and children. And they're my greatest teachers in parenting. I've learned so much about myself from them, and I take all of our daily experiences into the work that I do with other families. I mean, obviously I have a lot of training outside, but I think my greatest training is the work that I do with my kids. And even though I'm a parent coach and this is what I do day in, day out, they're typical kids, same challenges. They're not perfect little angels or robots. So I feel grateful that I get to practice. I'm in it, I'm practicing what I preach every day. And I totally screw up too, lots of times as well. And luckily, I have very forgiving children and understanding and embracing the fact that mistakes are opportunities for learning. So, it's a challenge because I feel like I need to be a really good parent all the time, 24/7, because that's what I do. And also give myself some grace when I don't have the energy or fuel to show up the way I want to.
Yeah. Well, can anybody be a good parent 24/7?
I don't think so. I think we all put these unrealistic expectations on ourselves, and it's, sometimes we forget that there are really unrealistic expectations.
Yeah. So what has 2020, in your practice and with your clients, what has 2020 done to the world of parenting?
I think it's parenting was already hard to start, right? Like working parents already were doing a major juggling act. And now I think it's like everything's full throttle. And not only is it just harder managing the logistics between home and school and kids, but I think, there's bigger challenges that kids are facing right now that we need to support them with. A lot of stress, anxiety. Some kids just don't do well in school online, so struggling academically as well. So I think there's greater challenges that kids have and greater challenges that parents have, and just the two is kind of the perfect storm. It's really a perfect storm. And even though my heart goes out to working parents that are raising young kids especially, I'm glad it's bringing it to the forefront and the focus of employers that they need to support their employees where they're at, not just in their role as a professional, but as their role as a parent as well. Because if they are not feeling supported in that parent role, they're not going to be able to show up and be a good employee or teammate or leader in whatever position they have.
So why is that? Why is it that we can't bring that best and highest functional self to work when we have the parent piece sort of falling apart or feeling rough?
Yeah, well, first, if we are completely drained from the work we're doing at home, we're not going to have the energy, the focus, or the creativity to do the work that we need to do, right? So, all of that, and just, if we are not feeling successful at home, if things aren't feeling shored up, all of that is sitting there on the brain, right? Like that comes with us. We don't literally right now working from home, shut the door and it all goes away. It's all there. So it really does, it's a distraction, and it affects the way we feel about ourselves and our competency and our self-esteem. So all of that affects the work that we do outside of our homes.
You mentioned feeling successful as a parent. So is that a new idea generationally that it's possible to succeed at being a parent?
Well, I think it depends on what your definition of success is. If you feel like you have a good handle on things and you're feeling confident in how you handle situations, I feel like that's success. It's not that like we have the perfectly painted family and my children listen and do what I say. I just feeling confident in I have the parenting skills to manage this, and I have a strong relationship with my child. I have a lot of parents that come to me in crisis, and unfortunately, they waited a long time. Like situations have gone on for sometimes years and years. And parents are at a loss. They feel helpless. They feel hopeless. And that's just not a great place to be, right? And that trickles into every part of their life.
So how do you help parents, get reset from helpless and hopeless?
Well, I think I help first parents shore up like what their goals are, like what are you really trying to accomplish, and not just thinking in like the short term of like I want my child to listen to me when I tell him to do things, but like the kind of human they're trying to nurture and the type of relationship they're having. So I think it's getting refocused and also shifting the lens and better understanding why their child is behaving the way they are or doing the things they're doing. I think many times we're responding to what we see on the surface, and we're not taking a step back and using the lens of like, what's underneath here? And I think when we look at what's underneath the behavior, we have greater empathy for our kids, and we have greater clarity on the best way to manage a situation. So my role is to help parents kind of shift the lens in which they see challenges, and then also identify the tools and strategies that they already have, and just making small little tweaks so they're more effective in the way they parent. And a lot of it comes down to just how we're communicating, being more intentional about how we communicate and what we're inviting from our kids. So many times our kids' behavior is in response to what we're doing and saying. So if we make a shift in what we're doing, many times we see a shift in their behavior.
Man, that's a big one to take in, because honestly, some of the stuff we're seeing coming our way behavior wise is it's tempting to think, where is this coming from? What is going on? Where is this coming from? And the last thing I would think is maybe they're responding or mirroring like what I'm doing.
Many times, absolutely, right? I mean, you and I have talked about this, that modeling is so powerful. What we do and how we manage our stress and whether we take care of ourselves or not is going to influence what they do in those situations, right? So most parents think about like, what can I do for my kid, or what should I say to my kid? And many times it's like, what should I be doing, right? In a situation when my kid is freaking out and losing it or having a big emotion, many times we focus on calming them down. And I think it's even more beneficial to take a moment and just think about, where am I right now? Where am I emotionally? Yeah. And what self-soothing skills can I use to calm down? Because how I feel and how I act is going to influence my child. So refocusing the attention many times on ourselves, which doesn't feel kind of like the natural thing to do. The knee-jerk response is focus on the child. Yeah. But our brains are wired to emulate one another. So many times the greatest impact we can have on our kids is what we do with ourselves.
So can we do like a specific example on that? Because that sounds really good. Yeah. but let's just say the kids are fighting really, and they're super amped up, you know, big emotions on both sides. They're angry, they're whatever. Yeah. What should the parent do to turn the attention to his or her own self first?
Well, I think in that situation, being mindful when you approach two kids that are escalated, noticing first how I'm feeling right now, like, where am I before I jump into this? If I'm like, are you guys kidding? Right? Like that, nobody's going to listen, connect, or want to move through whatever you want to move through with them. But if you approach it from a place of empathy of like, hey guys, what's going on? Right? Yeah. Which is hard to do because, like I said, our brains are wired to emulate. And so many times when we approach two people that are escalated, we feel escalated as well. But as adults, we have a lot more practice in our self-soothing. So whether it's taking a few cleansing breaths, or maybe I'm just stepping out of the room for a second to like gut check myself, like, where am I before I walk into it? We're going to be so much more successful than like jumping in. Well, we're flipped out. Right. And many times that's kind of where we are, and we're just not going to be helpful or effective in those moments.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to write this down. No flipping out, mom, which is probably that's probably one of the hardest things about 2020 in my experience is we're all stuck in this house. The regular outlets have been either removed or so modified that they don't feel like outlets anymore. Right. And the tension is higher because of all this. So it's not even like we have less to process. We have more to process. And I think I've been guilty of jumping into the fray and then kind of thinking like, wait a minute, I wasn't even in this fight 5 seconds ago, and now I'm participating, you know?
Totally. Like, why am I freaking out about this? When is their issue? Yeah. And that's why I like suggesting to parents that when they approach any parenting challenge, they start with an empathetic statement. And it sounds like, oh no, or uh-oh, or oh, it's so hard. It's that first thing that we say before anything else that opens the door and allows the child to know that like, hey, I hear you, I see you, without putting them on the defensive right away. Because if we come in and like, hey, what's going on here, right? They're on the defensive to us right away versus like, hey guys, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to do that when people are escalated around us. So that's why it's a practice and a skill. And some people are naturally empaths. right? They're very
Yeah.
empathetic naturally. Some of us not. It's a practice, but the more that we practice it, I liken empathy to a muscle. The more that we practice it, the greater we have to it, and the more it feels just natural in the way we respond.
Mhm.
So like with kids, especially young kids, it's so hard, is a really easy one to interject in
Yeah.
lots of situations. Some people say things like, oh man, or oh no, just to get the kid to tune in. They're like, I hear you, I see you. And then something many times will come after that. But it allows us a space to connect
Mhm.
before we correct or redirect kids. And without the connection, we're just not going to be successful in managing through like the situation of conflict between two kids.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so say that again. Connect before.
Are you correct or redirect? And so
Okay.
this empathetic statement that I'm suggesting is a way to create that connection using
Oh,
empathy.
that is really great. Thank you. I feel like that's one I can try right
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. And I always suggest like pick a one-liner to start with. Don't like think, okay, what's empathy in the moment? Because it's going to be really hard to think in the moment. So I suggest initially just pick a one-liner, and maybe you're already saying something. Or maybe you just need to pick something. For some families, it can sound like, oh, you look really frustrated, or you sound disappointed.
Mhm.
The key is staying away from you're really angry or you're really sad, because we're telling a child how they feel. And that many times escalates things or creating a power struggle.
I've definitely done that one wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I said before, this is all little tweaking, Marty. It's not
Yeah.
it's already what you're doing, but little tweaks. Or another one that I hear a lot when I ask parents, like, hey, what do you say naturally is empathy? They'll say, I'm sorry, or I know. That's a great place for tweaking as well, because this isn't about me,
Yeah.
right? When I say, I know, I had that, right? Like many times parents go on to like a situation why they know, then it becomes about us and not about the kid anymore. And many times, if you know, then why are you making me do this? Or why
Right.
right? So that's not super helpful. And I'm sorry is basically us taking responsibility for their feelings or what's happening. And we really don't have responsibility. So I suggest kind of staying away from the I know and I'm sorry, and then telling kids how they're feeling, and focus more on like what you're noticing. You look, you sound kind of thing is a great way to express empathy in those moments.
Okay, that's awesome advice. Thank you. Because I think that's probably been so hard to figure out how to strike that right note with them and get them to at least listen in. Now, so here's my follow-up, I guess, to that, which is many of us have now started to have the experience of parenting in front of our coworkers. Right?
Yeah.
So I've got, I've potentially got a client or my coworkers looking at me on a screen, and then that presents itself, right? The child runs up, they're sad, they're mad, they're escalated. So what do you tell parents who are trying to kind of do this under the spotlight?
Yeah. Well, I think that's why the empathy really is powerful, because we're not ignoring our child and kind of pushing them away when we're like in our
Yeah.
Zoom meeting,
Yeah.
but it's an acknowledgement, right? It's an acknowledgement. And then if we're on Zoom and we need to handle a situation, we can move to that situation. But it's an acknowledgement in itself. And sometimes that will appease a child to manage it on their own, come down a little bit until we can like get off our meeting or out of light. I think the biggest challenge parents have, and I've seen it on Zoom in situations, is like, I'm on a call right now, right? Like we sit, like stress starts to bubble. So that's why I think the empathetic statement is like really a great, just one simple thing that we can say. And I think too, it's helpful in reminding us to not over talk so much, because our tendency is to like remind and explain and negotiate. It's just like, hey, but it's hard, and I'll be there in a moment, right? Like it's just kind of like, we're not going to go into the want, conversation, which isn't helpful for kids anyways. They don't appreciate it when we start talking at them. So it's a great reminder to stop talking. And I wanted to mention, Marti, that if this is something that you really wanted to embrace and practice, or those that are follow your podcast, I have a free program called the Keep Calm course.
Oh, cool.
And you can sign up for the Keep Calm course on the Childproof Parenting site. So I want to make sure I give that information to you, because all we do is practice this one response for an entire week.
That's awesome.
It's hard. It's hard work.
It's really hard. And I don't know for sure, but I'm willing to bet a lot of us didn't grow up with parents who had access to parent coaches and Keep Calm courses, right? So we're building a new skill in ourselves as we try to teach it in them, right?
Absolutely. And I think too, what I've noticed, especially with my clients that are running big companies, they're struggling to manage a 3-year-old, but they can manage a multi-million-dollar company, is that a lot of the skills that you use in the workplace with the people that you work with can be applied to working with our children. We just don't see that connection between those skills. So I do help a lot of professionals kind of hone their skills at work and apply it to how they interact with their children. For whatever reason, people think it's a totally different set of skills, and that's actually not the case.
That is so fascinating. As if we could be two different people, this work-life thing wouldn't be so difficult.
I know.
But we're not two different people. Oh my gosh. So with you personally, as the sort of lockdown has closed in, do you feel like you have the conditions in your own life right now to be your most creative?
That's a great question. I think, what I've seen, obviously we've been in this lockdown for a while, is the time during this period that I've been really intentional about my self-care and finding balance in my life. I think I can be creative, but I've definitely gone through, a roller coaster of times where I haven't been great about self-care, or I've taken on too much. And that's when, I do see a lack of creativity in those moments, and just a lack of functioning. Honestly.
Right. Well, thank you for being on. I mean, I think that I've been really curious with all my guests about the conditions you need around you to be creative, right? And many things are thematic. We hear, I need quiet, I need, peace, I need separation, or I need music and these things. What I think is so interesting about what you're saying is actually, if you fill your own bucket with that self-care, maybe the conditions and the surroundings maybe aren't the key to creativity. Maybe it's just feeling better cared for.
Yeah, I think that's a piece of it. And now that you're talking about it, I think just having a clean, organized space for me makes a big difference. Earlier this week, my husband was asking me like, hey, is something wrong? Is that, you seem really stressed out. Like, are you depressed? And I'm like, no. And then a few days later, I realized, the house was kind of a disaster for a total bomb. And I realized that totally was stressing me out.
Yeah.
I spent a day just organizing and cleaning everything. And I've just, all of a sudden, everything felt so much lighter to me, right? I can just show up totally present and able to engage, where it was stifling to me.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to be surrounded by chaos, and we're surrounded by chaos outside our homes right now. I mean, all you have to do is read the news to realize things are still very upended and disrupted. Do you feel like your husband has similar needs for his most creative self? Does he need a tidy house, or does he need self-care?
Well, he definitely needs self-care, and his self-care takes the form of running in the mountains. That makes a big difference for him. I don't know. I do know that he likes the organized space, but I don't think it affects him the same way it does me. And I think also, as we're talking about it, and I've thought about this over the last few days, I think a piece of it too, and this plays out for us, but I think also our children a lot, is some of that like mess around me is also like an issue around control. Like we just don't have a lot of control in our life right now. And so controlling like how our environment looks and feels, I think makes a big difference. So I think I felt maybe a little bit out of control when there was just stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
You know
I
what I
can
mean?
relate to that. I know a lot of moms I've talked to can definitely relate to that, and dads too. I mean, you're right. Everything feels out of our control at the moment. So what is one tip that you would give? I mean, I know you have thousands of tips you could give working parents, but what is a tip you'd give working parents? And I'd like you to say, like, here's a tip for parents where you're both home working, and then maybe a tip for single parents who are trying to do this on their own.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think one of the biggest tips I can give to all parents, and this kind of plays off what we were just talking about, is being mindful that our kids, their world feels very out of control right now, right? And in general, they have little control. Like as parents, we control kind of where they go to school, what's for dinner, where they need to be at 4 o'clock, right? Like we're in control of lots of things. And now with this situation where they can't even like go and play with friends on the playground, like feels super out of control. So being mindful of giving our kids some control within limits is really important. And I think that a lot of the challenging behaviors that we're seeing is because kids are feeling out of control and powerless. So I suggest giving kids limited choices. So even around things that don't matter, like, hey, what do you want for breakfast? Do you want me to make pancakes or do you want a bagel? Like just giving some limited choices gives them a sense of control. They have this like control piggy bank. And if it's depleted, they're going to be looking for places for control. And usually it's not in positive ways, right? It's usually really challenging, those issues. So we're giving lots of places in throughout the day where kids can have some control. Like even like if they don't want to eat dinner, hey, do you want to eat dinner at 5 o'clock or 5:15? Do you want to eat your broccoli first or your mac and cheese first? Like the order in which things happen. It's time for bed right now. Do you want to brush your teeth first or put your jammies on first? Like these little bits of control make a really big difference for our kids. It seems kind of silly, like they're going to put jammies on and brush teeth, but if they get to choose when it happens, where it happens, in what order it happens, it makes a really, really big difference. And I think we forget about that, especially when we're so busy managing so many logistics. We're like, brush your teeth, get jammies on, get in bed, right? Story, blah, 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 right? To them, it's very depleting. So being mindful that from the first point and they wake up in the morning till the end of the day is many limited choices. It's not like, hey, what do you want for breakfast? It's offering 2 choices, 2 you're okay with, and 2 you're going to follow through on. That simple. But that, not just from my own experience, but the hundreds and thousands of parents that I work with, that makes a huge difference.
Okay. That's a great tip. And it feels manageable. That doesn't feel overwhelming to try. That feels really manageable.
Right. And, you know, to your point on creativity, sometimes it takes practice and creativity to find choices in places we wouldn't otherwise be giving choices. But I guarantee around bedtime, there's probably 50 different limited choices you could give your kiddo. But it does take a little bit of creativity to come up with like what those choices are and how they look and sound.
Yeah. Because inside you're thinking, go to bed.
Brush your teeth.
You know, because we've had a long day and there's a lot on our plate from a stress standpoint. So I do find by bedtime, my creativity is pretty low. So maybe I'll pre-plan some of that to try.
Yeah, absolutely. The parents that I work with in my coaching practice, we practice this together. And then I give them homework to practice it before bed. You know, if bedtime's the biggest struggle, like sit down, I give a worksheet of like different ways to give limited choices. So that way you're prepared in the moment. And if things go badly, no problem. Let's just use that as a learning opportunity and brainstorm, hey, what could I have done in that situation? where did I miss the boat here? And what choices could I have given in that situation that could have avoided this whole meltdown altogether?
Right. What would you say to parents as we face the holidays? So Hanukkah's ending, Christmas is next week, we're going into New Year's. A lot of us now are off school, such as whatever school was. So how can we cope?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot that's happening, and every home looks really different. I think for kids and parents too, I think one thing that will be helpful is number one, focusing on what we're gonna do together versus what we're not gonna do. I know a lot of families are disappointed because there aren't traditions that they're gonna be able to maintain. So this is maybe where creativity comes in again. Like, okay, how can we maintain this tradition, or what's a new tradition that we can add? I know for me, I have a dear friend who is actually Jewish, but throws a huge Christmas party every year, caroling party. And she's been doing this since her kids were born, and her kids are like in college now. And this year, because we can't meet and carol together, she organized all of us to show up in our cars in a parking lot with speakers, and we all caroled from our cars together, right? So like same tradition, looked totally different. She had elves deliver cookies to everybody's car, but like, sometimes we just got to get a little bit creative. So I think finding new traditions, altering old traditions, focusing on the things that we're going to do together, not what we're not, and then having a little bit of structure around our days, because most kids are off for about 2 weeks. That's a long time. So even if you can have like a general structure and how our days happen, obviously with the holidays, that's going to look different. But just so kids know what the expectations are and what's going to happen, kids feel better, have a greater sense of safety and control when they know what's going to happen or what's expected of them. So I think having those conversations with parents of older kids, having conversations around what they can do socially and what's safe in their family is a really important conversation, especially those that have college kids coming home that want to reconnect with old friends, having those conversations before they get home, ideally, but when they get home, like setting clear boundaries there will be really important.
Okay.
But having some structure, pretty key.
The
I think for all of us.
Well, yeah, and the structure is so interesting because you think of them being like they're on break. They,
Right.
they're getting a break.
Right.
But yeah, I think we've all been around sugared up kids who've been inside for 2 weeks and it's not easy. So
It's not pretty. Yeah. And even if it's like, hey, we wake up and like, obviously kids can sleep in, like we wake up, we have breakfast, then we go outside or, just something general. But so they know how the day flows and what to expect. And then we have quiet time, or then we, whatever, but they know what to expect. And I think we will get less resistance when we've decided what this looks like up front. And ideally, we decide this up front with our kids. So we have the conversation together and not like, hey, mom or dad decided this is what's going to happen. Like, hey guys, let's talk about what the next 2 weeks going to look like on an average day. Like, what do we do? And just plug that in. And having the kids guide that conversation as much as possible is going to help. Because we're going to have greater buy-in when they decide how their day goes versus we decide how their day goes.
yes. Well, and getting the buy-in, like that makes me think of what you said about the corporate skill. We've all been in a situation at work where we've got to get consensus
Right.
to move forward. So if we can kind of think about that, is there anything that you as a parent have just kind of let go of since all this kind of happened? Is there anything you've just said, okay, you know what, we're not even going to worry about that anymore?
Yeah, I think I've eased up in areas. I don't know if I've like whatever. I think, with my younger one who's 14, he socially, he doesn't necessarily connect with his friends over like FaceTime or anything. So I've definitely let go and eased up a little bit on the amount of time he plays video games, because that's where he socializes and connects with friends. It's not that he has unlimited, but we've given him a little bit more time. And his friends tend to stay up a little bit later than him. So I've eased up a little bit there just so he can be present when his friends are there.
Yeah.
So I think that's one area which, I am totally like anti-screen technology, like limit it as much as possible. But I know for him socially, that's his only social outlet. So I guess that's one area. I can't think of another area. That's a big one. I think
Yeah.
I kind of eased up on, and being clear that this is for this window of time. This isn't like a shift in how it's always going to be.
Right.
But for right now, yeah.
Is there anything you guys as a family have started doing during this time that you hope you get to keep doing? Any new traditions or ways of spending time together?
Yeah, one thing that we did, which was really fun, that gave us the space and time, is we did vision boards together.
Oh, wow.
And we did it probably a month or two into the pandemic. And my oldest decided to do a vision board with friends, and both of them have talked about doing it at the beginning of the year. So I think we're gonna kind of add that as a New Year's tradition this year, which is kind of fun. Um, I just appreciate having time with my kids, because as teenagers, they wouldn't typically be spending as much time with their parents. So I think just the time that we're hanging out and spending together is really unique, and I treasure that.
Mhm.
But nothing specific. We're doing a lot more puzzles together, that type of a thing,
Mhm.
during our downtime, where they would typically be running off to sports and clubs and all of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Puzzles are a great one. I've heard that one. And just this time is really unique. If we can pause even for a minute and remember, we wouldn't normally get this much time. However old our kids are, we wouldn't normally get this.
yeah.
What have you done just for yourself lately?
What have I done for myself lately? That's a great question. Well, one thing that I've done is I've actually started to take baths, which I really have, probably 6 or 7 years went by living in this house and I never once took a bath.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's one thing, because that's a space where you can't be productive, really.
True.
I feel like even in my self-care, many times I'm feeling productive. I think that's one thing. I also, knowing that where I live in the country and we're going to be locked down for a long time, I've invested in some fitness equipment that I typically wouldn't have invested in, and created a routine around that, which has really been helpful for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Why is that self-care so critical for parents?
Well, I think number one, it just creates a space where like you're focused on you, no matter what it is, whether it's writing in a journal or taking a shower. We had a conversation about self-care together a while ago, and one of the parents was focusing on the fact that just taking a shower without her child in in the room was self-care. And we just can't show up the way we want to show up if we are not taking time to refuel for ourselves. I had a parent write me this morning saying, I'm overreacting to my child. I should be, more patient. I shouldn't, right? And that word should is just like, it's really toxic.
Yeah.
Of all of these we should all over ourselves all the time, and that's not helpful. And so I think that self-care allows us to stay focused and present and fueled, because there's no way we can be patient and empathetic if we are running on empty. And most parents these days are pretty darn close to empty most of the time.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Okay, last question, which is kind of another creativity flexing moment. So if you were to design a t-shirt right now for working parents, what would it say?
What would it for work? Yeah, it would be, I got this.
Uh-huh.
I got this, right? I think sometimes we just need to have our own little mantra.
Yeah.
And when we use that mantra, like we can show up that way. I love, I don't know if you're familiar with Amy Cuddy, who's a researcher. And she talks about like body position and how the influence of our body influences how we feel and the messages in our brain. And she suggests to parents and just anybody in the workplace and speakers, if you take like a Superman stance for a few minutes before you present or deal with a tough challenge, like you're going to show up
Wow.
with that confidence. Like it influences your brain. So she says you need to fake it till you become it. So it's not like fake it till you make it, fake it till you become it. So if you keep telling yourself, I got this, then you're going to feel like you got this.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I really like that. Thank you for that, because I think a lot of us have had moments in 2020, or at least I have, where I'm like, I don't got this. I can't even remember what this was, but I don't have it. You know what I mean?
Have any of this.
Right.
I don't know what I'm doing. Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I like that mantra. And I think that'd be a fun t-shirt.
Yeah. I would wear that shirt. And I think parents getting that little shot in the arm is a good, gosh, that's probably not the analogy to use this week, but shot in the arm of encouragement is helpful. So I just really appreciate your perspective and your time, not only as a therapist, but as a mom yourself and a parent coach. So thank you so much.
Gosh, it's my pleasure. It's always great spending time with you, Marty. Thank you.
It was really fun, and happy holidays to you and happy new year.
Thank you to you and your family as well.
Thank you. And I hope in 2021, we are having a whole different set of conversations.
Yes, I am fully confident we will.
Okay.
We got this.
That's right. We got this. Superman. All right. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.